Hi everyone, it's Emma, and today I'm joined by not Noah Crick, but Oscar Crick.
Oh, yeah, sorry. This is my
Yeah,
brother's Zoom account.
yeah, I thought that might be the case. It's a pleasure that you're with us today, Oscar. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course, yeah. So my name is Oscar. As you may have gathered already, not Noah. I'm 18 years old. I'm part of a family of six, homeschooling family. Been homeschooled my whole life, which is a great thing. It really is. And so what else is there? Yeah, so my family's in the ministry. So we run a ministry as a family, bringing the Bible alive through creative arts. So I get the massive honor and privilege of being part of that, which is a huge blessing. What else? I've been cooking for a lot of my life. I live in Merseyside. Didn't come from there originally, as you might be able to tell by my accent. Originally from Surrey, hence why I sound really posh. But yeah, that's a bit about me. I have two crazy dogs as well. So
Lovely. So you alluded to firstly your family are in the creative arts and they do is it they bring the Bible to life through drama, is that correct?
yeah, through musical theatre, that's right.
Yeah, that sounds so exciting. We'll link your family's ministry below so that people can check out because you do productions across
Yes.
the country, don't you?
Hmm.
But you also alluded to the purpose that we're here today, and that's to talk about cookery because Oscar is going to be tutoring a basic cookery class with us in the autumn, one semester class, basically teaching the basic cookery skills that are kind of essential.
Yeah.
How did you get into cooking?
Oh, big question. Okay, so oh gosh, it all started probably when I was much, much, much younger. I remember I used to cook alongside my dad. So more baking actually, probably when I was smaller, but probably more baking. Making things like biscuits and cakes and stuff. But specifically, one of the main things I remember was we used to make gingerbread men. And I used to steal the dough from the worktop next to dad, and I'd always be eating the raw dough. And I still do it, I have to admit.
Yeah.
It's just so good. But yeah, so I started baking when I was very, very small. And then from then on, time passed, and eventually you go up and you begin to be able to step out into a little bit more yourself. So a lot of baking as well, making cakes, that kind of thing. But my cookery probably really ramped up for me in lockdown. I think for a lot of people, we were searching for things to do. We all needed a hobby to keep ourselves occupied and sane, as it were,
Yeah.
being locked in. So during lockdown, I really began to press into doing cookery, and it was just almost, maybe a relief for me in a way. I was really able to go and just cook and cook and cook, and I'd always be wanting to go out and get ingredients, and stuff for whatever I was wanting to make. And I'd say to mum, "Hey, mum, can we get this?"
Mhm.
So it really ramped up during that time. Did lots of it then. And actually, during lockdown, I was able to cook for a gentleman, and I was just able to take a meal to him every day
That's
during lockdown.
lovely.
So yeah, I really began to get into it during that season.
Mhm. Wow, I remember one of my memories of lockdown where was trying to get flour because everybody suddenly wanted to start making bread, which was
Yep.
really annoying for people who already made bread.
Hmm.
No
Hmm.
longer buy the flour because it was sold out for like 2 weeks and then it kind of just reset itself.
Oh yeah.
You did some cookery classes in lockdown, or did that kind of spring out of lockdown?
Yes, so it kind of came out of lockdown. So yes, you're right. So in 2020, late 2020, early 2021 sort of time, I started a cookery online class called the Crooning Cook. It was on Zoom. I say it was called the Crooning Cook because one of my other passions is music.
Uh,
And what I did during that course was I wrote a song for every recipe on my ukulele. So I would write a song. I'm just thinking because I thought it was right there. And it is. I still have the ukulele from that time. But it was just a little wooden thing, and I'd write a song for every recipe, and then we'd get into it. So hence it was called the Crooning Cook. Now we had quite a lot of kids eventually come on. Obviously things take a little while to grow.
mhm.
So there was a point when it was thriving. But as time went by, lockdown passed away, people began to get busy again. Sadly, that began to drop off,
Mhm.
and the class came to an end in 2023, if I'm right in saying. So yeah, eventually it slowed down. But for a while, I was doing that, and kids were cooking. They were sending pictures of the recipes. We had a group chat. Everyone was sharing, and you see kids beginning to make things, and they're taking pictures, and so yeah, that was what I did for that period, the Crooning Cook.
That's really exciting. I think what you said of, especially younger children like yourself, you started to learn to cook. It was baking kind of was your what started.
Hmm.
Same with me. With growing up, I would bake with my mum.
Hmm.
And my daughter, she's an amazing cook and an amazing baker, but it was just that kind of little girl in the kitchen helping out with
Yeah.
baking. And it for any parents who have not at the teen stage, that kind of younger child, say just get your kids in the kitchen
Yes. Yeah.
alongside you, helping. It sometimes slows you down, but it will. That's the entry place of learning the skills of cooking for so
Yes.
many children. Um,
Yes.
you're 18,
Yep.
and it is really great that there's a young man. You are going to be teaching teens to master basic cookery. There is such a stereotype, and there is a truth in it, that teens often just want to eat junk food.
Yeah.
There's been like recent studies that have shown that if you look at the uptake of ultra processed food
Mm.
within the Western diet, but then if you break that down into demographics, that teens are eating a disproportionately higher amount of ultra processed
Hmm.
food
Hmm.
than the rest of the population. And within the rest of the population, it's still really high. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. You obviously see that really climb, when kids leave school, they kind of leave home and they go to university, college, and they're getting so busy, I'm just going to live off pot noodles, I'm going to live
Mhm.
off fast food, it's quick, it's convenient. But perhaps we don't always realize the effect not only that has on our bodies, but also we're missing out on so much.
Mhm.
So that specific demographic, the teens and young people, that kind of thing, you know, I think the best thing to say to somebody like that is, you're not gonna, or maybe the best thing is, you're not gonna know how much you might like it until you try it.
Mhm.
Because a lot of teens and youth will see cooking as a chore, something their mum did for them. I come to the table, I eat, I disappear. It's not something they can really enjoy. But if they actually will take the opportunity to, to go into the kitchen to find the kind of food they love, even fast food. Let's say they love burgers and fries, they love
Mhm.
tacos, they love that kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but why not learn to make it yourself? You
Yeah.
know. So if we can kind of say, you love that kind of food, so let's try and make it. Let's see how they do that, and then they're like, "Whoa, this is so much better than." I won't name, a chain, but this is so much better than the fast food restaurants. Maybe they'd actually be excited about it and want to do it more.
And they'd feel healthier.
Yes,
Your
they'll
body
feel
can
healthy.
respond to the thing is as well, a lot of fast food that and junk food, when you make it yourself, the the kind of foundational parts of that are actually healthy. Like
Yeah.
Chinese food, if you buy it from the
Hmm.
takeaway, it's not really good for you. But if
Yeah.
you Chinese food is actually very, very good for you. There's lots of vegetables, there's lots of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
flavoring. It's there's so much there that is good, but it's been through the ultra processing, through all the
Hmm.
chemicals, it becomes
Oh
not.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it's really good that as a young man you are
Mm.
able to speak and almost be for especially for teens that are younger than you, saying actually it's not just your mum that can cook and that can give
Yeah.
and allow you to eat healthily. Here's somebody who's just a little bit older and relatable kind of an age and saying this is something that you can do and it's
Yeah.
going to
And
be
enjoy.
better for you and enjoy and
Yeah.
give you a lot of pleasure.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's kind of just shifting gear a wee bit. You're involved in ministry, your family's in ministry,
Yeah.
and I think that as Christians, there's a lot for us to really unpack around the area of food. In the
Mm.
Bible, we see food mentioned actually a lot, either
Yes.
directly, but kind of playing a second role in the background. In Jewish culture, we have the biblical feasts,
Oh yeah.
which are all centered around food.
Hmm.
And in the New Testament, we also see food as a central part of Jesus' ministry. Jesus is obviously, he's often going to people's houses, he's eating.
Hmm.
Much of his miracles, much of his teaching happens at the table.
Yeah.
I was reading in a book, and I can't remember the book, but the guy was referencing a Bible teacher, and he said, an
Hmm.
expert in the book of Luke. And this expert in the book of Luke had said that Jesus, in the book of Luke, you see Jesus either going to a meal, coming from a meal, or at a meal. It's
Yeah.
so central. The idea of hospitality is so central to Jesus' own ministry. As believers, what are some of the reasons that is therefore important for us to learn how to cook?
Oh, that's a great question. And in fact, you bringing up the biblical side of cookery and, kind of where food fits into the Bible is something I was really thinking about recently,
Mhm,
because it is actually, you look through the Bible and you see Jesus was called a glutton. Not that he was one,
mhm,
but it was the amount of food that he was eating and, the kind of people he was eating it with, of course, as well. But,
mhm.
the in Jewish culture, as you said, food is a huge thing.
Yeah.
It's the centerpiece of the feasts. Whether you're talking about a halal loaf or whatever, is being used.
Mhm.
Food is a huge part of it. As Christians, I think one of the big things that food does and learning to cook will do is produce opportunities for fellowship.
Mhm.
You know, Often in the Bible, you see Jesus said, I have been longing to eat this meal with you.
Yeah.
You see him gathering around with people and they're eating. When he
Mhm.
restored Peter after his crucifixion, it was over grilled fish. He prepared for them for breakfast. He knew, I know certainly for the heart of man, for a man, food is
Mhm.
where you get to the heart, right? But just in general, fellowship and food go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So one thing, just as a person, learning to cook isn't just about, oh yeah, I'm great in the kitchen. You also then get an opportunity. I'm going to present this to my family, to my loved ones, to my friends, and they're going to be able to enjoy it. And we're going to sit down and you'll be able to talk to them about how you made it. You'll be able to encourage them to want to cook as well.
Mhm.
But from a purely Christian standpoint, fellowship is so important.
Mhm.
And being able to cook just really makes that happen so much
Yeah.
more. It really does. Another reason as well would be, Jesus said to look after our bodies.
Mhm.
And it sounds very stereotypical. You need to look after yourself, but it's actually something we do to honor God.
Mhm.
Eating well, eating healthy, eating clean, as they say. It doesn't mean that you have to eat celery sticks and carrot sticks for the rest of your life, but it just means if we can learn to cook in such a way where it's going to benefit our bodies, we're going to be getting the nutrients we need, we're going to be getting vitamins and minerals that we need from the food. We are honoring God in that regard because we're not just piling ourselves full of junk and shortening our lifespans.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that's the way God's designed our bodies to operate. He's
Mm-hmm.
designed our
Mm-hmm.
bodies to need these nutrients, to need um, a healthy diet, to
Yeah.
function properly. It's really is hardwired into our DNA and how God has made us.
Yes, indeed.
And just back to what you said right at the beginning, that during lockdown you were cooking meals for an elderly gentleman.
Well, he wasn't so much elderly.
Oh, yeah,
To be,
a gentleman. You were
that's
cooking.
okay. That's
Yeah,
okay.
I think I just added that bit in. You were cooking meals, but that act of ministry and service came out of being able to cook. It's so fundamental to so much of our life.
It is. It
Um,
is. I mean, he'd suffered a stroke,
mm,
and he was doing a lot. Basically, it's a long story. We ended up staying with him on his farm during lockdown. Long story, but basically during that period of time, I was able to cook for him, and I can remember where we were staying on this farm. There was these rolling hills that went down to the river, and he was like, the farmer there, so he was doing all this stuff everywhere. And so I would run down the hills and I hop over the fence with a foil tray, and deliver him his lunch. His face and just the happiness it can bring to somebody,
yeah.
you know, just can not only bring them joy, it can bring you joy,
Mhm.
just being able to, the elderly lady across the road, that she's really struggling right now. I can cook. I know she loves scones. I'm going to take scones to her. Person in church who's just lost a loved one. I'm going to make this for them.
Mhm.
You know, like any hobby, like any gifting, whether it's carpentry, cookery, music, whatever, if you can use that gift to bless somebody, it's a really special thing, and that's another
It is.
really important reason for cooking.
It really is. It is. It is so meaningful to be able to
Mm.
do that for another person. It really is.
It,
It's simple. It's basic. It
mm,
seems so mundane, but yet it is so profound.
hmm hmm
Um. So you'll be doing basic cookery.
Yeah.
Can you share what folks can expect from this class? And also, what will it look like in an online setting? Because you've already done online cookery classes. What
Mhm.
does that look like? Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the way I used to do it when I used to do Crooning Cook was really quite simple. Basically what you do is you let the class know these are the ingredients you need this week. This is
Mhm.
the recipe we're doing. Come on, have these things prepared. We're gonna cook it together. And then really simple, we get on Zoom and I would, demonstrate, right, follow along with me, we're gonna make the recipe. Now you need to chop this. And they're just doing it in real time and they can ask questions, which is pretty similar to how we're going to be doing it on Arise as well.
Mhm.
So on the classroom system, they will go on there, they'll have a look. Okay, this is what I need for this week. They bring it on, say, hey guys, welcome back, and we're just going to dive right into the recipe. But the other part about this isn't so much just learning recipes, it's learning the basics as well.
Mhm.
So, there may be some weeks when you need one egg because we're learning how to master scrambled eggs. We're learning how to master this is how you do a boiled egg. It seems so basic, but that's a great place to start.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff interactively. So don't feel like, you're going to be watching a video. I'm just going to sit here and write notes, and then I never really get to do anything. It's very much interactive with me. So you can ask questions. Why are you doing this? Can I add this? Etc. So yeah, there'll be a lot for them to do, and really just hopefully be able to follow along and enjoy.
So on a very practical note, so before the class start, like,
Mm.
and with enough time before the class begins, there'll be a list of this is what you're going to need for the lesson this week. So these are the
Exactly.
ingredients you need to have, and when the class happens, they'll need to be in their kitchens
Mm-hmm.
with all their ingredients, and they're
Yep.
going to be cooking alongside you. So they're able to ask the questions like, "Oh, I don't know how to do this. I don't know."
Exactly.
Yeah, and then you'll be able to answer that, show
Mm-hmm.
them, and they'll be working through this. So anyone doing this class will need to that slot when the class is, they'll need the access to the kitchen
Yeah.
during that period.
Yeah.
Um, is there going to be homework?
That is a good question. That's something I'm going to be thinking about as I'm writing the curriculum, working out what that will look like. There could be, for instance, if we're learning new terminology, things they may not understand, what's sauteing, what's dicing, what's this, what's the difference between dicing and chopping, these kind of things might be something that, I'll begin looking at as, building the curriculum. So yeah, there could be homework,
Mhm.
but maybe not for every week. It just depends
Yep.
what we're doing.
And that's actually a really good point. Those kind of little fine details with cooking, because I know with my own children,
Mm.
um, as an adult, you kind of read the recipe and you just kind of do it, and there's so many terms that come up in a recipe that
Yeah.
you don't realize that they're a bit strange to somebody who's never read a recipe
Yeah.
before. What is
Yeah.
that actually? What's the difference between chopping and dicing? What?
It's a whole other
How
language.
do something up? So,
It's a
how
whole
is
other
it
language.
different?
What's needing?
Yeah.
What's the difference between, yeah. So there's a lot of things to learn, and
Mhm.
that'll be something we obviously look at on Zoom, but could also be something really important to look at off Zoom as well. So they begin
Mhm.
to recognize, okay, so I need to chop this finely, so I can't have it all, really chunky. So there's obviously lots of different things to learn, but it's not something to be afraid of.
Mhm.
Learning cooking and learning the language of cooking is actually really cool.
Mhm.
Because you can say, oh, I'm just sauteing this, and they're like, what? Oh, I'll explain. It
Once you know the language, it opens up so many
does.
other
Exactly.
a recipe that's really simple but has all these terms. You learn the terms, you're then able to take that knowledge and take it to something a bit more complex and just be able
Exactly.
to do it because you understand the terminology and those basic techniques.
That's exactly right.
Is there any special equipment that families would need?
Oh, that's a very good question. So on the Arise website, we have a list of equipment which is recommended from the textbook we're using.
Hmm.
So I put most of the equipment the textbook recommends onto the website. Now, I can't say necessarily every single piece of equipment I've listed is going to be used,
Mhm.
because it's recipe dependent. But if you take a look on the Arise website, you'll see the list there. Eventually, soon I'll be putting up a very specific list of equipment people need to have. But it'll be very recipe specific. So one week you might need this, the next week you might need this. You won't necessarily be using the same tools every week.
And the a lot of the equipment people will already have in their homes, presumably. It'll be pretty,
A lot of it, yeah.
yeah. Um, you just alluded to the fact there is a textbook. What is the textbook? And you've said that it needs to be a hard copy and not a digital one. Why is that?
Okay, so the textbook we're using is by a wonderful, wonderful legend in the culinary world, Mary Berry. I brought it with me. We got Mary Berry on Zoom. Does that enhance the podcast?
That's okay. Yep.
So she is on. Yeah, so this is her cookery course. It's very, very simple. I used to have this cookbook. We lost it during the move we did from a house, but then we got it back. So this one is fantastic. It's a bit hard to show you the pictures because I've got a blurry background on. But
I've got it too.
have you got it too?
I've
If
got a
you,
different cover on mine.
oh yes, yours is paperback. That's the only
Yeah,
difference.
it's not it's paperback, but not paperback. It's kind of like more. It's
Yeah,
more sturdy, but yeah, there's. I will see if I can like. There's lots of kind of these kind of pictures where it shows you the step by steps and
yeah, exactly.
it's
And
very visual.
pictures are going to be really important because often if you want to, and obviously being on Zoom already, you'll be demonstrating it. They'll be able to see, what's going on already. So it's really good. But when you're cooking on your own, like if they're, going away doing homework, they need to make this. The fact there's pictures is really good because they'll be able to see, oh, okay, they chopped this sides there. She's doing this. So it's a really great textbook. It's very, very simple to use. And there's lots of great recipes to learn basic skills.
Yeah.
So it'll be a really great one. In regards to why not digital? So I remember I was speaking with Shannon from Arise about this, and why we should use hardback. I'm quite an old-fashioned person. In general, I like record players. I like old vintage type things. There is something really nice about using something you can hold, you can turn pages on, and you just don't so much get that from using a digital version. You're swiping, you're trying to find the recipe and stuff. And on here, you can mark the page. You can even the silliest things. You can go back and say that stain was when I made a boiled egg. That piece of dried pastry was when I made my first short crust. And even down to the fact that just using something like this, something that's actually hardback, makes it much easier for you in the kitchen as well. In the sense that when I'm cooking, and if I use an iPad and I've looked up a recipe, often you spill flour on your device or you get this spilled on it, and it's not as forgiving as a book.
It is very true.
Covering the home button and you're trying to clean it out and you've got pastry around the room. So
yeah, I have my cookery books get splashed. They are stained.
Yes, that's good.
You do not want this to be on your iPad.
No.
It is not. Yeah, that is a bit of you're in a kitchen, there's stuff happening. You're already going to have your device with the class on, which you need to kind of like. You don't want too many devices. Let's limit that.
Using your mum's device.
Yeah. The other thing about having a paper copy is sometimes I write little extra notes in my cookery books.
That's a great thought. Yes.
If you are a large family, you might be needing to think about scaling things up. So for quantities, or if you're switching out, we're about to talk about like allergies in family situations, and so sometimes if there's if you need to switch out a dairy product for a non-dairy, you can write how does that work in those cookery books. A little thing about the Mary Berry, before we go into that, the Mary Berry cookery book, she had an older version of this. I can't remember. I had it years and years ago. We used it so much the cover fell off and it's falling apart. But that was actually the cookery book that got my daughter really cooking.
Yeah.
And it was very similar in format. Nothing, it wasn't like all bells and whistles, like a lot of celebrity cookbooks are a bit.
Yeah.
But a lot of fluff there.
Yeah.
It didn't have any of that. It was scaled right back. It was basic, easy to follow.
Yeah.
And the thing about our recipes is they don't mostly they don't require really fancy
Hmm.
ingredients or strange ingredients.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
stuff that's easy to get in your
Hmm.
local supermarket.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of introduction to cookery of just good, hearty family meals that people would eat on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And she
Yeah.
gets that, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
Mary Berry has a fantastic way how she's laid this out. It's gonna be so simple to use. And you're right, not the fact that it isn't all frilled and fancied up won't scare people as well. If you're looking at a cookbook, you're like, oh my gosh, I've never seen that before in my life. What is
Yeah.
rabbit's foot? Why? All this kind of stuff. So the fact
And
that
there
it's
are some
basic,
special recipes. There's one there for like I think it's a game pie, which is like a
yeah,
bit fancy. So there
yeah,
are fancier recipes there for special occasions, but
yeah.
it's mostly your kind of everyday things that you would just have for dinner.
And just to introduce, this is obviously a basics of cookery class. If in the future any of the kind of classes arose, I was going to arise. I'm sorry, just the irony there. If another one were to come about, it might be that we do go to a more frilled up and fancy cookbook. That teaches Indian cuisine or teaches
Yeah.
Jewish cuisine or whatever else. And that's when you can move from there. But this is all about just learning how to be able to function in the kitchen, how to keep the kitchen clean and tidy,
Yep.
how to feed your family. One day you're going to need to feed your family, whether or not, whatever. So, yeah, it's just learning the basics of family wholesome cookery. That's all.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, I kind of alluded to this just a minute ago. If a child or teen has an allergy, like
Yeah.
dairy or gluten, etc.,
Mm-hmm.
would they be able to tweak the recipes to accommodate this?
That's a great question. I actually have this problem for a little while as well. And it's not so much a problem more than just something you have to get over, to just a different way of cooking, that's all. So with intolerances or allergies, my mum was gluten-free for a long time. So I had to get around cooking without gluten, which was a challenge. But eventually I was able to begin to make cakes and stuff, and they almost tasted no different. So you begin to learn.
Mhm.
And with allergies, things like whether whatever allergy that may be, or intolerance, dairy. And my mum actually can't have milk. So oftentimes we're swapping out stuff for coconut milk or whatever. So yeah, personally for me, I have experience in working with food with intolerances and stuff like that.
Mhm.
It can be recipe specific.
Yeah.
If you have an egg allergy and we're learning to cook a boiled egg, probably isn't going to work, but a lot of the time we'll be able to swap out things. I'll be able to suggest things that you can use instead. If we're doing a meat recipe, we're doing toad in the hole, let's say, and you want to go get vegetarian sausages, that's fine. That's
Mhm.
fine. So quite often there will be things to swap out. But if there was an occasion where we can't do that, I could let them know or put that specifically in the details of the class. If you have an allergy to this,
Mhm.
whatever. So yeah.
I think it's really interesting because I'm gluten free as well, and been so for about 4 years, I think it's been.
Mm-hmm.
And because I can cook, the transition's been a lot easier
Yeah.
because I'm able to learn, okay, I can just swap this and do this. And
Yeah.
there's something like bread is like I used to make a lot of bread and
Yeah.
gluten-free bread, even homemade gluten is
No.
that's
No.
that's a whole other ball game. But there is, if you're able to cook, when you come across these kind of problems, you're able to pivot much more easily. I
Yeah.
see adults who have are diagnosed with a food intolerance. If they don't know how to cook, they are floundering about
Yeah.
how to pivot, and they find that really difficult.
Yeah.
And just that idea of from that young age being aware of actually this is something that can be managed, and you will come across people in your life who are got intolerances, and it can be it's navigatable if you just have a little bit of knowledge about how to do that.
And being able to cook food for people with intolerances is actually really, really good. Like, I mean, I used to supply for a cafe, and if you can cook gluten-free food, if you can bake gluten-free cakes, if you can do things with people that have intolerances, and they're like, oh, I really wish I could still eat that, and you can pull it out and say, I can make it. And they're like, well, you can really bless somebody who has an intolerance if you know how to go about that. And you're right. If you have a basic knowledge of cookery, you see, okay, so I'm dairy intolerant. I can't make this recipe. I can't make custard because it uses milk. Well, I know it's obviously milk. You just need to use a dairy alternative. So go get coconut milk, whatever. But if you don't have a basic knowledge of cookery already, it's going to be harder for you to be able to swap things out because you won't know, why do we even use that? Some recipes specifically require flour because of the strength of the gluten holding things together. So why do we need that? And this is where basics of cookery and just learning really simple principles will even help people who have intolerances to be able to, like you talked about earlier, mark out on the paper, okay, I'm not using this, I'm using this. And this quantity because it's this, etc. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah. But it all starts with those basic skills. If you've not got those basic skills, this kind of more complex ideas, you're not able to work with them. So it's building that good strong foundation to then work on. So your class is 15 weeks, starts in September up to Christmas. What time of day is it?
So it's going to be on, forgive me, is it Wednesday 4 to 5:30, isn't it? Am I right in saying? Just need to make sure it's momentarily.
But that is that afternoon slot. So we've made it so that it's not it's a good time. So if you're cooking something, it could end up being used for dinner, but it shouldn't be. And it's not in the middle of lunchtime when families are trying to deal with getting lunch and all of that. So we've made it so that it should be a time that's navigatable for your average family.
And hopefully, with a lot of the recipes that we do, you will be able to say, it's 5:30, the meal is done. Call your family, enjoy it together.
Yeah,
and that was the big things about Crooning Cook. Actually, for a long time, was parents got to be able, they were able to come and have their child make them dinner. So if this course we're making a meal, you can say to mum that day, hey, I've made dinner. And the joy you'll get from that, and they'll get from that, is amazing. The clearing up, maybe not so much, but that'll be hopefully something we have to we'll deal with.
That is something that you're going to say. We were going to work into the class, is that whole idea of it's not just about coming and loving having to cook something. You clean up after you. It's not a blessing to your family if you leave it like a bomb site. Yeah, I understand this. Well, I have teenagers who often cook at night time.
I've been guilty too. I've been guilty too.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Oscar, for coming and speaking to us today about your class. If anyone has got any questions about the class, about the suitability for their teen or child, just send us an email and we'll pass it on to Oscar to answer that. It's been a joy speaking to you, Oscar. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.